This is Cult Film Face Off.
Hello and welcome to episode 31 of Cult Film Face Off. My name is Chuck Rollins. With me as usual is Nick Leonard.
Look what your brother did to the goddamn door!
This episode we're going to be looking at two seminal car-themed movies from the 1970s, specifically 1971. We're going to be talking about Vanishing Point and Two-Lane Blacktop. But yeah, they were both released in 1971, but we'll start with the first film to be released that year in March, I believe, which was Vanishing Point, directed by Richard Sarafian. An amphetamine-addled loner named Kowalski speeds from Denver to San Francisco in a 1970 Dodge Challenger and inadvertently ends up becoming a legend. Vanishing Point.
Name, Kowalski. Occupation, driver. Transporting a supercharged Dodge Challenger from Denver to San Francisco. Background, Medal of Honor in Vietnam. Former stock and bike racer. Former cop, dishonorably discharged. Now he uses speed to get himself up, to get himself gone. Everybody's after Kowalski.
Because you think we're queers.
For one reason or another.
Is there something I can do for you?
Well, like what?
Like anything you want.
Everybody wants a piece of his hide.
Maybe killed somebody. Maybe stole that big dude of his. Maybe both.
I'll get that son of a...
They want to get him and put him away, but they'll have to catch him first.
Good morning, folks. This is yours truly, Super Soul, directed live transmission from KOW with the wham bam, boom boom, wake up music.
Okay, Vanishing Point. Had you seen this before?
I've never seen Vanishing Point. I have heard of it.
How had you heard of it?
It rang a bell. The title rang a bell. Vanishing Point rang a bell.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I saw it. Weirdly enough, I saw it on a double bill with Two-Lane Blacktop many years ago.
Well, you saw them one after the other?
Yeah, I'd rented them both, and I watched them later.
Double DVD release.
Yeah.
Okay. So what was your recollection of it? What did you think?
I remember that I liked one of these films more than the other, but I kind of liked both of them. And that's kind of how it played out. Vanishing Point is, it's an interesting one. The cult following it's got is very, very fierce. It's got a really dedicated cult following. Do I understand that? I'm not entirely sure. It's one of those films that you have to really appreciate, sort of films that wear their allegorical elements on their sleeve and are quite evasive about what the film's about as such.
Yeah, I mean, it opens up. It's got a real tantalising opener. We get a plot device of going back 48 hours to find out what events transpired to get you to that actual point. Yeah. I really like that as an opener. The star of this film is without doubt the white Dodge Challenger.
Yeah.
I mean, it's beautifully shot and photographed. Obviously, watching it today, the car chases and stuff are pretty tame, but I'm sure at the time were pretty impressive.
Yeah, right.
I just like the setup of he goes, sees his dealer, picks up a load of speed, and then makes a bet about driving from Denver to Colorado and San Francisco in under 24 hours. I mean, this character is addicted to speed on the road, and he's addicted to speed physically.
Yeah, right.
I wasn't quite sure of what I thought of him, because he's kind of... The character of Kowalski is the archetype of the strong, silent type. We've seen it in Ryan Gosling in Drive.
Yeah.
They give him a backstory, but it felt all a little bit kind of... a bit shoehorned, a bit like he was a Vietnam vet. He was a troubled policeman. It was just kind of, but he's a romantic guy on the beach. It was all a bit kind of, that felt like a bounty ad.
To be honest, the thing that I thought was interesting about this film was that it felt to me, and there are loads of people who interpret this film in different ways, it felt to me like early on it was suggested that this might all be a hallucination, the hallucination of a dying man who is dying in a car wreck, because you see that brief footage of him in that car wreck and you think, okay, because of this sort of very, very elusive opening where that car basically disappears, it seemed to me like this was going to be all going on in his head as he was dying. And to support that, I think all of the flashbacks that show who he was paint him in the best light possible. It's like if someone was telling you a load of anecdotes and they were like, oh yeah, and it culminated.
Well, it's kind of like
I was the greatest actually.
Well, that's why it's so whimsical.
But it's weird that like when he stops the rape in the car obviously, and then he was removed from the police.
But it's all how he remembered it, and he was the hero.
He was always the hero, and when even in the film itself, where this shithead like challenges him to a race in this flash convertible. He wins the race, the guy goes tumbling over, and again, it's like, oh, well, Kowalski was the best that day. It seems like it's kind of structured to, this is his version of events, because he's always the greatest at the end of it.
Yeah, that's I didn't think of it like that. That's interesting.
And he was honourably discharged from Vietnam. Every information about him.
I would agree. I mean, everything, it is placed in extremely positive light. I know I said that whole beach scene plays like a bounty advert, but if he was looking back, on his previous conquest, then everything would have this kind of rosy hue to it.
Exactly, yeah, that's it.
Quite a horrible sequence when they storm the radio station and ceremoniously beat up the blind DJ and his and the other guy who was working there. Quite nastily done. I don't know. Are they saying? I mean, there was kind of like this unforeseen mental bond between like the blind radio DJ and between Kowalski.
Yeah, a lot of people think because there are instances where Cleveland Little, who's the DJ, speaks to Kowalski and he responds and they have a conversation over radio.
Yeah.
A lot of people think that he's supposed to be God.
I was like, oh, right, okay. There's a huge backstory of this guy. There's the bone of this theory.
There's a lot of people that say this means this and X, Y, Z. I don't think this makes this film particularly interesting. If it's not part of a very, very built-up narrative, when there are allegorical elements, I just I find them a little bit tiresome. Because a fan of this film could sit down and say, right, that's God. That's a flashback to the. You just think, okay, that.
But has the director confirmed or denied any of these theories?
The one thing that I know that he's confirmed. Have you seen? I take it you haven't seen the Charlotte Rampling scene.
Where she smoked weed.
Yeah,
I read about it.
The UK version of Vanishing Point had a 6 or 7 minute scene with Charlotte Rampling, which is. It's a ridiculous scene, and I can see why they cut it, because basically Kowalski pulls over by the side of the road and picks up Charlotte Rampling, who looks like she's just walked off a catwalk in Milan. And the popular fan theory, and I think the director actually said that this was the case, was that she is the devil or she's death.
Okay, right.
Because she said, she gets stoned and she keeps saying to him, "I've been waiting for you for a long time." And you just think, okay, the scene more or less ends with this meaningless encounter, but people think that. Actually, I'm pretty sure the directors actually said, "Oh yeah, she was supposed to represent death," and the blonde, vivacious, the girl who he sort of basically offers to jump in the car and ride off with him is supposed to represent.
Temptation?
I mean, this is life and death.
Yeah, I mean, this.
So the whole thing is this is.
I don't know.
He's suicidal.
I don't know how much lip service I've paid to, because they do seem to have all of these interactions he have are very kind of. Doesn't seem to be any resonance with them. They're kind of. He flips from seeing, meeting these people, speaking to the guy who rides off on the little bike, the hippie guy, the exchange of dialogue with the girl. She's basically kind of offering herself up on a play. He's kind of turning it down. It's all quite skinny on the surface stuff that doesn't look like it's alluding to anything. There's the whole kind of dreamlike quality of all of those encounters is that I don't know.
When you
they don't seem to be meaningful encounters. Do you know what I mean?
This is my problem with it. When people have readings of a film or they think that certain things represent other things and stuff, that's fine if the narrative works in itself. The problem with Vanishing Point, I think, is that it has all of these elements, and you can take or leave whether you think X means Y or whatever, but you're left with essentially a travelogue.
A chase movie.
It's not even really a chase movie because it only ever focuses on Kowalski. So I mean,
well, the cops are chasing him across those three.
But it's never made explicit the sort of chase aspect of it, because it's kind of it might as well be a dream. It might as well be announced to be a dream at the beginning, because there's no real threat. It's not really a thriller. It's a guy driving, and yet the police are on his tail. And the other thing is that it's weird is that he's supported and deified by a bunch of people just because he's breaking the rules. I understand that had resonance.
But he's championed as this
a guy who's doesn't give a fuck and is and disregards the police and all that stuff. I can understand that at the time it was made, something that simplistic and that blunt would have a certain degree of power. But it seems a little silly. And this, watching it now, all of these people like this guy. He drives.
It just seemed really over the top.
Yeah,
it didn't seem, there was no justification for how they were reacting to him. I didn't get this.
Yeah, it's silly. I mean, it's just it seems slightly juvenile. Yeah, well, he's the last American hero. Why? Because he's getting whizzed up and driving. Yeah. It's. I mean, you could pick this film apart quite readily. I mean, at the bottom line, I've said this already, but if a film is dense with plot and dense with things to be concerned about, and somebody gives you a different interpretation, that's fascinating. But this film lives or dies on whether you buy into the many, many things that it suggests that it's saying about whatever. The film is great to look at, and I did suspect that the director was maybe an immigrant, because they always he is obsessed with landscapes. I mean, the film is obsessed with visual landscapes, and they always say that it takes an outsider to capture America properly. They always say that it takes somebody.
The Midwest does look especially beautiful.
It looks
really alluring. I'd love to. This whole thing is appealing to a young target audience who are just like, I'm going to go against my folks, and go against society, and just rebel
by just driving,
doing a lot of speed.
But yeah, I mean, the locations in Vanishing Point, I'm pretty sure I've never seen them before. It looks like another planet sometimes. It looks it is amazing. But yeah, that's what this film is: a guy driving from A to B, doing some drugs, occasionally interacting with people where he always looks amazing at the end of their encounters, and a load of people, for some reason, revere him like he's some sort of god, just because he's not. He has complete disregard for the law, and is essentially a law unto himself. Anybody who's even vaguely anti-establishment is deified. I mean, I think that there's a lot of films that came out in that period that had. I can relate to.
Yeah, this is as I said before. I mean, this is a studio who want to cash in on the huge success of Easy Rider.
One of the weirdest things I felt was that the dialogue was often quite unnecessary. I mean, it was flatly unnecessary. Early on, I can't remember what the exchange was. Someone says, "Oh, hey, this must be important. The cops are here." And you said, "This didn't need to be. This dialogue did not need to be said." It seemed like some of it was added in post-production, and it would have been uncommercial if it were a silent film. But I just feel like the dialogue was sometimes just trying to provide unnecessary answers, and I thought it was better when it was a little bit more enigmatic. It's weird. It's a load of contradictions, this film, because on the one hand,
there's not any poignant dialogue in it.
No, there isn't. But at the same time, there's functional. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. This is a really difficult one, because if you don't buy into, if you don't want to explore the film and what things could mean, and you just want to sort of enjoy it as a narrative, I think it's pretty much a failure.
I couldn't recommend it.
And the whole thing was a suicide mission from the beginning. He's suicidal and he embraced death and all, and it's like, that's fine, but I've just been watching a guy driving a car for 70, 80, 90 minutes.
Yeah. I did read, which was interesting, that Primal Screen loved this film and they wrote their own soundtrack to the movie.
Yeah, have you not heard Vanishing Point? I think it was just they were.
It was like inspired by a film as opposed to actually, we could rescore this film by using our W Woozy fucking music.
To be honest,
it's more like we love the movie. Yeah. We're going to include samples in it, and we've written them.
Yeah, right, exactly. Right. I mean, and it's not. I mean, there's one song called Kowalski, which is just the lyric. I think the whole. I mean, it's a great banging piece of music, but the whole lyrics are Kowalski, Vanishing Point, over and over and over and over again. So it's not the kind of thing that's going to enhance or affect your love or hate of this film. But it's an awesome album. I mean, if you do anything after listening to this, I mean, if this sounds like it's your cup of tea, if you're one of those people that likes to pick things apart and say, try and study it like a puzzle, there might be something in it for you. But if you do anything, listen to Vanishing Point by Primal Scream. That's what I say. But yeah, I just thought it was strangely undernourishing. If you like that stuff, the stuff where things are supposed to, character's supposed to represent death and someone's supposed to represent life and all this. If that sounds like your cup of tea, it's front and centre in this film. But if you don't really like slightly ham-fisted allegorical elements, you're left to enjoy the images, and that's it. And that's not unpleasant. It's a bit of a grind for 90 minutes. Yeah. So yeah, undernourishing is the word, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I found it. It's the first time I've seen it. Very competently shot. But I just it did feel dated. It's a film of its time. If you're a massive Dodge Challenger fan, then you gotta watch it because it's kind of pornographic how the car shot.
Yeah, really.
Right, should we move on to number 2?
Yes, okay, let's move on to number 2. Released in, I believe, July of 1971 in the United States, directed by Monte Hellman, Two-Lane Blacktop. A pair of young drag racers drift from town to town earning a living from their beastly grey Chevy 150 until they enter into a bet with a charismatic gambler. Two-Lane Blacktop.
You got nothing in that engine but a bunch of worn out.
Sure we'll race. You're damn right we'll race.
For pink.
Pink slips? You mean for cars? You want to race for the whole shot?
That's right. All a rolling stock.
Where to?
You name it.
In that case, smartass, Washington, D.C.
Right. Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C. Just a second, man. No, you're on. You're definitely on. I was going there anyway.
Show them how to do it.
Okay, so Two-Lane Blacktop, I'd seen this before, as I said before. You'd never seen this before?
Never seen this before, never heard of it.
You'd never heard of it?
No.
Okay, what did you make of it?
It starts up and we're introduced to 2 guys. The title's rolled and we're introduced to James Taylor as the driver.
Yeah.
And Dennis Wilson as the mechanic. And alarm bells started ringing. I was like, oh no. I thought, fuck. We're in driver territory.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought, yeah.
So my heckles were up a little bit. The music in this film is very good indeed. Really good. Tracks by Chuck Berry, Chris Christopherson, The Doors are used really, really well. But I found it cold, nihilistic, tedious and uninvolving. I really didn't enjoy this film.
Didn't you?
At all.
Okay, I liked it rather a lot. I mean, I really, really like this film quite a bit. I think the difference between this and Vanishing Point is that this is a really well plotted film. I thought that when
Warren... There is no plot.
Well, I mean...
There is no plot in this film.
You could say that, but I think that when the way that Warren Oates appears and reveals that he's being followed or thinks that he's being followed by the 2 main characters who we've just been introduced to, I thought that was a really fantastic... I mean, I was hooked. I was hooked from the beginning, to be honest. But when that happened, I just thought this is a really ingeniously built film. Whereas I don't think anybody could say the same about Vanishing Point.
Warren Oates is the sole good performance, apart from, in addition to Harry Dean Stanton as a rather horny hillbilly. Horny hitchhiker. Yeah. I found it very frustrating as a film. I found it very frustrating with a lack of narrative, the lack of plot. Yeah, they're having a car race, but they're not really having a car race because they just stop all the time, have a chat, help each other out sometimes. There's no tension. And I'm sure you could say, well, it's not about the race. It's not about the race. It's about life's being the race. But I just found it really cold and just pushing me away. And I was really into it for the first 15-20 minutes.
To be honest, I thought it was captivating for almost the entire running time. I mean, I think it isn't really a film in the same way. It's not a car film in the way that Vanishing Point is. It is more of a character study.
But there's only one interesting character in the whole film.
I think the thing is, it's kind of similar to The Driver in that there's one very charismatic performance played off against, in The Driver it was Bruce Dern versus Ryan O'Neal. Ryan O'Neal is a vacant...
but he's a vacant screen presence. I mean, James Taylor and Dennis Wilson. There's no screen.
I think that serves a purpose here. I think because they're these nihilistic, self-centered young people, and Warren Oates' character is kind of... There's a weird... It's refreshingly unusual, I think, that there seems to be this bond formed that's totally one-sided. Warren Oates doesn't know anything about cars. He wants to know about cars. He wants to impress these young guys, and he
does know about cars in terms of the surface. In terms of the surface, he knows about cars. But he can quote what his car does, what the engine of his car does. He hasn't got the practical skills that the 2 young guys.
And that's what he wants. He wants. I mean, there's that scene in the diner where he basically tries to sort of cover for them and make excuses for them. There's this weird dynamic. It's almost like a family dynamic. You've got these two guys, and he's trying to sort of be this, almost this father figure to them. And I think the best thing about this film, there's this awesome moment where Warren Oates feels obliged to give this grandmother and a grandchild a lift to a funeral so that they can pay their respects at a gravestone. The grandmother and the grandchild are walking to pay their respects, and Warren Oates just stops and sort of stares. And I remember thinking that's a great moment, because his opponents, these two young punks who are basically nihilists, would never ever do that. They'd never ever stop and have that kind of compassion. But as the film plays out, you realise he wasn't having a moment of compassion. He was having a sort of a crisis of, like an existentialist crisis. He was realising, because immediately after that, he tries to. The young girl that's been hitchhiking with him, he says, let's go and settle down. I want to do this. I want to do this. So he was having basically a life dilemma. And it heightens the film to have a pair of monosyllabic leads who barely display any personality at all, unless it's the emotion is somehow related to the car that they're driving. Having them face off against this old school, honourable sort of old cowboy guy, because it adds drama. I thought that some of the...
I didn't find him an honourable old cowboy at all. I found him...
I mean, he's shady.
He's shady. He lives in a fantasy world. I don't have an honourable cowboy. He is a habitual liar. I didn't get that from him at all. He is shady as they come, and is putting himself upon like an underage girl.
Yeah, that's really dodgy. But
he is dodgy, full stop. He changed his story to every single person that he picks up. He is a habitual liar. He's just permanently he is just spouting bullshit to anybody who'll listen, and trying to kind of tailor his lies to try and to get a closer relationship with the people that get in his car.
But he does have a conscience, and I think and the people that the two guys that he's racing against have no conscience whatsoever, and that seems to be the film seems to be setting up like that's going to be his downfall. Underneath all of the bullshit, he's actually a good-hearted person, and these people don't give a fuck about anything that isn't their car. And as it turns out, the film kind of twists in the second act, or the third act, I should say, where that becomes what benefits him and is the downfall of the other two characters. What did you think of the ending? The way the film, in a very, very sort of enigmatic way.
It didn't really surprise me. The real burning was the kind of was the final nail in me assessing this is completely convoluted and vanishing up its own rectum. That the actual real burns out at the end, rather than giving you any car. You don't get any car chasing the whole thing. You get one drag race. Towards the beginning of the film, and then there's one section of the film where you're getting a bit of an idea of speed and a bit of action when they're going around. I just found it was a film charactered by cold characters that I couldn't get. I was completely turned off by the whole experience.
To be honest, I found the whole film pretty spellbinding, as I said. I mean, allegedly the original first cut of this film was 3.5 hours.
Jesus,
I'd watch that.
Thank God it'd been trimmed down.
I'd happily watch that. Would I watch a 3.5 hour cut of Vanishing Point? I doubt it. There's a lot more going on, and it's so content to tell its story in very, very unusual ways.
But there is no story. There is no plot in this film. It sets up something that it doesn't even deliver that in its most simplest way.
But the fact that this race that they're trying to make happen doesn't happen is fascinating for the reasons.
I found it wholly unengaging and unfascinating. I got nothing from this film apart from a good performance by Warren Oates.
Yeah, I liked it a lot, and I think that there's a lot.
You can compare this to Easy Rider. I mean, there's a reason why Easy Rider defined a generation, and there's a reason why I never heard of this.
I'm surprised you've never heard of this, to be honest, because it's one of those films that I think has come up quite a lot.
When does it come up? I've not ever read about it. There must be a reason why. And I'm sure
it is.
Not just myself. I couldn't. There may be loads of things I've missed, but. I've never heard this, in reference to road movies or, it's never been on my radar.
Yeah, no, it wasn't available for a very long time, but I don't know. I can understand why it wouldn't work for somebody, but I just thought it was terrific. I mean, my problem with the ending is that it seems to insinuate that the girl who abandons everybody that she was training along with throughout the entirety of the film disappears on the back of the bike in the penultimate scene, and then the film ends. She was not, as far as I was concerned, a very, very important part of the plot. But it seems to suggest by the way that the film ends, and because she disappears on the bike with that guy outside of the diner, doesn't she? And that for that didn't seem like it should be as significant as the film made it seem, because I thought that when Warren Oates drives away and says, "Oh yeah, I mean I won this and I've won this," basically announcing that he'd won this competition. The placement of that scene I thought was a little bit weird. Apparently, Joni Mitchell's in this film. You can see her. She can see her. Yeah, she was going out with James Taylor at some point while they were making this film. I think this is something of a myth, to be honest, because apparently she can be seen in the background of one shot, but no one seems to be able to place it.
I read that. What's the name of the actress who played the girl?
I can't remember.
She died very, very young.
Oh, did she?
She only starred in 2 more films after this and died at like 25.
She looked amazingly like Hayley Mills, the old...
Looking at her, she really reminded me of somebody.
I mean, she looked amazingly similar to Hayley Mills. She was in the first Disney version of The Parent Trap. I'll show you a photo and you probably know who she was. But I thought that was uncanny. I didn't know she died. But I mean,
I read that before watching the film. I always think it's always one of those poignant things when you know an actress has died very young. You're watching, you kind of very sort of focus on that kind of. On that performance, but I mean, she wasn't given anything. She wasn't fleshed out. She wasn't, Yeah, I mean, I was wholly disappointed by the whole experience.
Okay, well, I liked it quite a lot. I think it's an imperfect film, but I think that there were some really unusual ways of sort of dealing with drama.
It's not my bag.
Fair enough. Okay. Well, before we go to... We've had some correspondence. Incidentally, if you want to get in touch, go to cultfilmfaceoff.com and then go to our blog, and at least 2 weeks before we record each duo of episodes, you'll be able to find stuff on there and you can contribute. Tell us what you think about the films involved, what way you think we should vote, etc. But yeah, here's some of the stuff we've received about this episode. Okay, so Lord Dreadlow says, Vanishing Point was iconic for me. I watched it so many more times than Two-Lane Blacktop. If you like these films, check out Dirty Mary and Crazy Larry, which is a film I'd never heard of. Peter Fonda. Right. Dirty Mary and Crazy Larry? No, me neither. Forever Mozart says, Two-Lane Blacktop isn't a car chase movie, it's a meditative character study. It really depends on where your tastes lie. Both excellent movies, though. One of them's excellent. One of them's better than
one of them's like passable fare. Okay. One of them's toilet.
JC Pup says, I just love Vanishing Point, but I never saw Blacktop. I guess I will have to find it. I advise that you do that. Dr. Cop on Twitter says, have you ever tried to sync up Vanishing Point to Primal Scream's Vanishing Point? It doesn't work. I'm not surprised that it doesn't work, but I think it might make the film more enjoyable. I'd much rather watch it silent.
The soundtrack, I tell you, the one thing going for Two-Lane Blacktop is the soundtrack. The soundtrack is very good.
Okay, right. One more email here from Andrew. It says, hello, Chet and Nick. Let me start by saying how much I've enjoyed the pod over the last year. Cheers. It's refreshing to hear 2 personal and honest reviews discuss some of the most obscure and interesting couplets of films. Your choice of films in particular have been great, and led me to revisit at least one old film every fortnight for the last 12 months. That's great. That's very nice to hear.
Is your dad called Andrew?
My older brother was my gateway into cinema. He introduced me to the macho classics of the 60s and 70s, and his particular penchant was, and still is, for cars. I recall returning home from school every day for 6 months to find him replaying the chase scene from Bullet in the lounge with the same fervent gaze of a kid watching it for the first time. He used to carry around a dictaphone with a recording of the chase from the French Connection and play it during maths lessons at secondary school. The bloke was obsessed, quite clearly.
Sounds like an absolute dude.
Yeah. I can still recognise the scene from Bullet from the sounds of the gears shifting alone.
That's nice.
In the days prior to the internet, we used to thumb through an old Virgin film guide, searching for potential candidates to track down and watch. When my brother discovered the review for an early 70s flick called Vanishing Point, he could barely contain himself. By all accounts, this was basically one long chase movie. Unfortunately, it wasn't available on video at that point, so we had to get hold of it the old-fashioned way. Wait for the BBC to show it. My brother had the VCR all ready to add another chase classic to his stable, and I braced myself to watch the same driving scenes for the next year. What a disappointment. This film was more Easy Rider than chase film, and the drug references and freewheeling nature of the film were lost on my 11-year-old self and straight-edge brother. I can understand that. I mean, Vanishing Point is not a film to watch at that age.
Yes.
The white Dodge Challenger was a thing to behold, and the ending was memorable, if a bit abrupt, but ultimately this one goes down as pretty average in my memory. Two-Lane Blacktop surely has one of the coolest titles ever, but despite watching it a few years back, I have very little memory of it, apart from the questionable love triangle at its centre. Does that even happen? Question mark in brackets. That's a good question. Keep up the great discussions, Andy. What do you... I mean, we're going to have to pick now.
Well, we're not going to pick the same film, are we?
Oh, God.
Austin, hater. But he's going to have to watch these because I don't know if he's... Well,
that's the whole point, though. I mean,
he has to have had some semblance.
No. The whole point of the Ostinator is we say, here's two films, pick one. Either you can make.
Well, I tell you what, he's a busy boy, but he's going to have to sort this out one way or the other because I'm not going down Two-Lane Blacktop.
Two-Lane Blacktop.
Not going down that. Not going down that slippery slip road.
Two-Lane Blacktop. So you're voting Vanishing Point?
100%.
Wow. Okay, I'm definitely voting Two-Lane Blacktop. So, regardless,
this is like because the Halloweens there was made from what memory serves. It wasn't as stoic as... Well, maybe it was as stoic. Stoic? Is that the right word?
Oh, no, it was the same. I was not going to vote it.
Yeah, but really, you knew it was just better. Though.
Yeah, Halloween too. Of course it was.
No,
of course.
No, joking aside.
I mean,
joking aside, you must have had some time to reflect on that and think, Halloween 4 is better.
Well, I thought... What did the Ostinator say? And he said Halloween 2. He knew his onions. So we're going to trust him.
He had a very hard time in life at that period, and now he's far more balanced.
If he doesn't understand... if he hasn't seen either of these films, he's going to have to make a vote based... He's going to have to be blind about it. So let's figure out... Let's hear what the Ostinator is going to say about this.
Give the man a call.
Eliminator with the Ostinator.
So we once again find ourselves at loggerheads and we need to decide a victor. So we bring in an adjudicator, the Ostinator. Ostinator, hello.
Ostinator, hello. That's me. Hi, I put the Jew into adjudicator. Let's go. All right, Cult Film Face Off. What have you got for me today?
Right, what we've got for you, we've got two films from 1971. First of those films is Vanishing Point. The second of those films is Two-Lane Blacktop. Who wins? You decide.
Vanishing Point all day. Never heard of the other one. Vanishing Point, 100%.
I cannot believe how right you are. That's it.
That's it.
Judgment has been passed.
Finished.
Vanishing Point for the win.
Let's go.
Eliminator with the Ostinator.
Okay, so the Ostinator has spoken, and that is the end of episode 31 of Cult Film Face Off. Thank you very much for listening. Check us out on social media. Check out our blog, cultfilmfaceoff.com/blog, and you can leave a comment and we'll mention it on our next few episodes. But yeah, thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you again.
Great to see. It's really good to see people are interacting with the blog, sending in what they think about the films that we're going to cover. It's brilliant to get feedback. Please keep it coming in. And we'll catch you next time.
See you later.
Ciao, bless.